something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route to do. We the people are free. And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
And change it to that one. Does that make a difference? I'm not hearing anything here. Can you hear me? Sound is terrible. Sound is terrible. Sound is terrible. Is it quiet? Is it loud? What is it? Give me an idea. Let me have a look here at what my internet's doing too. Some interesting things going on there. I'll swap to a different feed and see if that makes any difference with that. I'm having another look at my microphone settings. My level there tells me that it's all right. However, you guys might be feeling something a little bit different. Let me change this microphone to that. See if that makes a difference. And all right, guys, is that making any difference? Better now, don't touch a thing. It's all good. Well, I don't know if I touched it and it made a difference or I didn't. Thank you, Black Sheep, who's texting me. God love you. Sorry for the little bit of screw up there, folks. I don't know if you can see it. I'm playing around with a new microphone. And clearly, I'm not playing with it enough. Or I'm playing with it in the wrong fashion. And enough of you from the peanut gallery about things being played with. We're going to have a bit of a chat shortly, or in fact, it happened earlier today. Thank you to Becio from Truthseekers who helped set that up. A bit of a chat with SG Anon, and Darren Bergwerf joined us for that chat as well. So we'll have that for you very shortly. I just thought, I haven't been into the chat for a while, and thought I'd star a few comments and say hello to a few. Baz and Sunflower were early in today, 3:10. Yeah, I did set the show up earlier today. Be interested to know how many notifications went out. I set a time for notifications to go out today at 5:45. Whether or not you got it or not, I have absolutely no idea. Connie, how are you, darling? I hope things are going well. And Alan is, well, you're keeping him hard at work. That would be the best way to look at that. What the? You've worked out a preamble for political ads for this election. Warning, what you are about to hear contains lies, mistruths, and misdirection that has been legislated into existence so that they can promise the same thing in 3 to 4 years' time. I reckon we can use that, what the? I really do. Tony, I hear you're in northern New South Wales visiting, and it has been drizzling all day. In fact, it was persistently precipitating this morning when I got up at 6. It has not stopped here all day. It has just eased as I started the show. There is more mud than most Werribee ducks could be bothered swimming around here at the moment, but we have a lot of wild wood ducks who are loving it to pieces, can I tell you? And I've got to tell you how nice it is to find, well, I want to call them a herd, because there are so many baby ducklings that we've had on the property over the last couple of months, and they've all decided to pretty much camp out here. It's been wonderful, but they have absolutely no road sense. They like the roads. They'll walk up the middle of the road, and in fact, if you drive along the road and catch them, they'll fly up the middle of the road. Had one try and land on my bonnet today. I'm trying to make friends with the ducks. They're a little skittish, bit like the alpaca, but we're getting there. Tony, I hope things in the Northern Rivers are doing all right for you. Give me a call, mate. We might be able to catch up. Is Vince on tonight's show? No, he's not. Today is Wednesday. He normally doesn't appear midweek, and if you keep asking for him like this, he's going to get a big head. Don't be like that, Spike. We don't want Vince getting a big head. However, if you do want to see him, he's got some great stuff he's putting up over on our FBN channel. There's a couple of interviews that he's conducted over there, and we are looking to put up a lot more content on that as we go forward. So looking forward to seeing more from Vince, and he'll be on usually on Fridays. I love to have him on for the Friday session. And thank you to everybody who's made comment and shared last Friday night's show. It's gone wild. To vote or not to vote. Darren Bergwerf, no voting. Vince on the yes vote side. And you will find that that comes up in the discussion with SG Anon a little later on when we get to playing it. And that won't be too far down the track. Don't forget to like and share. Did I put that one up? Thank you, Aussie Sue. You remind me every day, and occasionally I remember to put it up. We do need you to like and share. The algorithm on this channel, and it doesn't really matter which one you're watching, if it's a YouTube channel, all of them are so badly suppressed that, well, you see, you don't get notifications, you don't hear about shows coming up. It's a battle that we fight on a daily basis with YouTube, and really the only way that we can fight it is with your support, and that's to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, please. And if you would care to, I would love you to leave a comment in the comment section, either here live or post video. I do look through them. I don't comment back a lot unless I'm directly asked for something or I can offer something, but I do get in there occasionally and throw the pen around a bit. So we'll see how all that goes. Let's go back to the live and see how Life the Universe is going. The Rockin' Housewife is in the house. Good to have you in. And yeah, you're getting a load of YouTube shorts now. Well, this is something that has happened using the StreamYard package that I use to stream. It updated recently, and now it comes up with AI packages. I have nothing to do with that. I just hit a button and it says I'm going to create these shorts. And to be honest, I've only watched 2 or 3 of them. They don't garner anything by way of revenue for us, but I guess it's a useful thing to put up and give you a bit of a tease for what we've been talking about. And essentially, that's the only reason I'm doing it, just to give little bits of information about things that we share, and some of it is going to become a lot more relevant in the coming days and weeks. I believe that this month in particular is going to hold a great deal of truths. Whether it's all the truth, I don't think so, but I believe that there will be some disclosures this month, and I think a lot of it will start tomorrow, our time. It'll start overnight tonight in America, being April 2nd, Liberation Day, and we'll talk about that with SG Anon in a little while. Can we have a show on what to expect and when should you choose not to vote? I think more would choose not to vote if they knew what to do and when. Rachel, what a good question. Essentially, can we do a show on how not to vote? Well, it's pretty easy how not to vote. You just don't vote. However, if you've already been put on the electoral roll, then you will cop a fine from wherever you were last registered to vote and not turning up to have your name crossed off. I believe if you are that way inclined, you have until, I think it's 8 o'clock on the 7th of April to update your information with the Australian Electoral Commission. I nearly called them something else. Shouldn't do that. But yes, we can talk more about what you should do if you choose not to vote. Darren and I were speaking earlier, and as you'll see, he's in the SG Anon chat. But prior to that, we were having a bit of a chat about this, and Darren is telling me that His team are working up a number of flyers, posters, maybe corflutes, and they fully intend on visiting as many polling places as possible, or having people at as many polling places as possible, to explain why the constitutionality of your vote. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I don't mind that idea. Don't mind that idea at all. Education at that place. Will it cause division at that place? I think it will, because there are a number of very one-eyed unibrow party followers who will take great umbrage at that thought. I can't see Darren taking a backward step should that happen, or anybody else for that matter. Education is free from us, usually, and if you choose to stand there and listen, you will be educated about the Constitution and the constitutionality of the vote people are going to line up, have a hot dog or a sausage, and go and do. So maybe, yes, a little bit of education at the polling places will go a long way. Will it make any huge difference this time round? I don't know. What it will do is hopefully awaken a few more people. But we'll wait and see, and we'll talk more with Darren about that. And certainly, yes, we will explore both sides. I will be talking to some people from the Heart Party next week who are running as candidates. I am happy to talk to anybody who wants to run as a candidate in this election, other than anybody from Labor, Liberal, Greens, Nationals, the Teals. I'm happy to talk to anybody independent. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to create change and make difference. Whether I believe you can make that change or difference is irrelevant. Happy to give you this space to talk about the changes you would like to make, and then be prepared. We will hold you to that. And when you can't make those changes in 4 years' time, when you want to come back and try and get re-elected again, we'll play that piece of video back and say, well, why didn't you achieve this? And why didn't you achieve that? And we will hear all the same excuses, I think, that we've been hearing all our lives. And one of those things that was put up a little earlier about, did I star that comment? Well, yes. That's probably the warning. Anything we hear from politicians, past, present, and potentially future, if they've been sitting in that place already, is probably in part lies, mistruths, misdirection, or half-truths. And I would be very, very wary of the promises being made. There is some modicum of hope coming our way. That is, for the first time in our living memory, and quite possibly in the nation's living memory, neither major party is going to gain enough seats to rule. They are going to be running in a minority government. Well, we know how that worked out in the lower house with the Teals and the Greens, didn't we? Labor light and Labor lighter. We need to fix this in the Senate. We can't do much about the lower house. I think the lower house is lost to the people. However, the Senate is a different matter. And there are a number of strategies, if you choose to vote, that you can follow that will enable your vote to count all the way down to the point, as Vince explained, your voice or your vote is zeroed out. And you can have that zeroed out before it gets to the Liberal, the Labor, the Greens, the Nationals, the Teals, or any other party that you would prefer not to get your vote. That requires below-the-line voting. And if you're anything like me, who takes very little interest in the voting part, then we're probably going to have to do some sort of an explanation about what below-the-line voting means. And it does mean a little extra work for you. Rather than ticking one box, you might have to tick a few. But it is very, very beneficial that you do so. There is also the alliance that has been struck between Heart Party Australia and the People First Party of Gerard Rennick and the Libertarians, which Craig Kelly seems to be fronting. I'll be interested to see whether or not Craig Kelly or Rennick reach out, but I don't think they will. Gippsland weather today. Oh, that's for you, Tony, up in northern New South Wales. Kyle, what am I saying? Rachel, you're asking about Dusty. I've sent Dusty a message because I have Dusty's number. He was in a show, I think it was a couple of days ago, and I received a text message from him yesterday. So I've sent him one tonight to make sure that he is okay. But like all of us, we get busy with family and work and other bits and pieces. Not everybody can turn up every night. But it's very gratifying, can I say. It gives me such a warm feeling when I see the care in the chat for other people in the chat. They're missed. This really is a family that we've built here. And for those folks who get in through the Facebook chat, I know that there are many who don't know how to get into the live chat. The easiest way to do that is to go to the main YouTube channel or to go to the main or go to my Facebook channel and log in there. And you will pop up in the chat and be able to chat. But it doesn't come through on every YouTube channel. So go to the VOF channel and you should be able to pop up in there. If not, it'll be the Voice of Freedom channel, which is one beside it. And if you want to come and join us in the chat, that'd be great. But I am so proud of the family that we have developed in here. And the fact that we do care about each other and that we notice when people aren't here. It's not that there's anything particularly wrong. God knows there's a lot going on in this country at the moment, and our lives are being made harder and harder by the day, only to make lives easier for the elites. And it's about time we stop doing that. Wake up, learn, educate. And if you feel you still want to go and vote and you do not want the major parties involved, then you must learn how to vote below the line in the Senate. Okay, and we will spend a bit of time on that. In fact, I will put in a call to Topher and see whether or not he might come on and explain the voting system again. He did a marble video. I want to say it was probably 9 or 10 months ago now. And it was a brilliant explanation of how our voting system works and how preferential voting works and how your vote is kept alive, or a portion of your vote is kept alive. Vince explained it pretty well in depth the other night, last Friday night. Topher's video is very, very good. I won't play it on this show, but I'll be very happy to have him on, and I've sent him an email, so we'll see what happens. He is putting out a fair bit of content himself at the moment, and it's not bad. It's very educational if you want to learn about the voting system. Not much flash if you have no interest in the voting system. You're not going to get a lot out of it. Crunch. What countries will Trump put 25% tariff and elbow as weak as pits? Yes, he is. I think you will find that by this time tomorrow night, most of the world will be suffering a 25% tariff. Any country that tariffs American imports will be tariffed at the same rate. That's my understanding of what will happen. We will talk a little bit about that with SG Anon. There is a great deal of interest in exactly where those tariffs are going to be applied, in what areas. We'll probably know within the next 24 hours. I suspect we'll probably know as soon as we wake up tomorrow morning. The world will be on fire because of it. These tariffs are being used. If you listen to our mainstream media and Europe's mainstream media, you would be of the opinion that American products, this tariff system that Trump is putting through, is unfair on all these other countries. The fact of the matter is, all he's doing is leveling the same tariff against those imports coming into America that is leveled against American exports into those countries. Now, let's say America, I don't know what America sends you, cars, all right, Rams, Dodge Rams. Now, I think those Dodge Rams are built in America, and then they are sent to Australia. Not sure if it's Dodge Ram that has the deal with Walkinshaw to do a sports pack version. It might not be the Dodge Ram, might be another one. But at any rate, they do have deals. Now, let's just say your Dodge Ram's going to cost you $150,000 today to get in the country. It's going to cost you a quarter more tomorrow because of the tariff system. Now, Australia, I don't think, levels a 25% tariff against American imported cars. Australia would be stupid to level tariffs against any imported cars because they'll just stop importing them. And we don't have a manufacturing industry anymore where putting a tariff on a car coming into the country would be beneficial for sales of our own locally produced cars. Are you starting to see what Donald Trump is doing? Donald Trump is trying to rebuild patriotism in a number of countries. He's trying to bring a fair playing field to global trade. Now, while the world seems to be screaming that it's not fair, when you look at the minutiae of the detail, it is very fair. The only tariffs Trump is putting out are at the same level that they are tariffed for their exports going into those countries, like China, for instance, and every other country in the world. So keep an eye on it. The tariffs are not a bad thing. It will give the world a level playing field when it comes to trade. And I suspect with a financial reset looming, and I am pretty confident that tomorrow, April 2nd, American time, will hold something along those lines. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow night, but without me stepping too far out and off the end of the diving board, so to speak, with no water in the bottom of the pool, I don't really know what Trump's going to say tomorrow. I've just been surmising, so we will see. Simon says he wants to build a new casino in Gaza. He probably does, along with hotels and God knows whatever else. This is theatre, okay? You have to understand that a lot of what Donald Trump is doing at the moment is theatre. And we will find more of that theatre coming to the fore, I think, in the next few days in particular, but for the rest of this year. And without too much further ado, we will get into the interview with SG Anon because we do discuss a bit of that in there too. New cars are the best way to lose money immediately. J1, you are 100% on the money. If a friend of mine used to sell Holdens back when we made Holdens, and it was interesting to note that a brand new GDS Senator, which I think at the time was about $80,000, around $80,000. This car was bought, it was driven off the lot, it was off the lot 1 hour, and the wife of the guy who bought it back and demanded that the dealership take it back, that they couldn't afford it, yada, 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 yada. God knows what happened to the husband. Anyway, the dealership bought it back, but let's say the price was $80,000. They paid $64,000 for it. It had been off the showroom floor for an hour. Call that depreciation. I mean, it had like 50 kilometers on it, if that. So, yeah, don't go buying new cars unless you are leasing them and you can walk away from it in 3 or 5 years' time. And that's a much easier, nicer way to step your way into a new car and not do all your dough in the depreciation phase of your new vehicle. Unless you plan on keeping that new vehicle for a very long time. And there are vehicles that, you know, you would do that. Land Cruisers and that kind of thing tend to go for years and years and yonks. But by the same token, there are a lot of shit vehicles around that don't do terribly well either. So do your research and maybe buy something secondhand that's only done about 40,000 Ks. It's around probably the best value you're going to get. All right, folks, keep up. We will come back for a chat after SG Anon and Becio and Darren and I get through our little chat, which starts, well, Vince will kick my ass. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll play Vince's ad and we'll get into SG Anon right after this.
Hi, are you passionate about supporting independent media and social events? Voice of Freedom is dedicated to bringing you the latest happenings and things that matter. But we can't do it without your help. By donating, sponsoring, or becoming a member, you're not just supporting our mission. You're joining a community that values transparency and engagement. Your contributions allow us to continue producing high-quality content that informs and inspires. Visit VOFHQ.com to make a donation or explore sponsorship or membership opportunities. You can even donate using crypto. Together, we can amplify voices that deserve to be heard as we continue to create a vibrant platform for social change. Go to VOFHQ.com, help us to help you by joining us and making a difference today.
And welcome to Truthseekers. We have SG with us today. Thank you so much, SG, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
Okay, we've got a few people here that's been waiting to speak with you. We've got Carl from Voice of Freedom and Darren from My Place Australia.
Howdy, SG. How you going?
Doing well. Nice to be here.
Finally
Thank
catch
you for
up.
joining.
Very nice to finally catch up. It's an exciting time in America at the moment. Liberation Day supposedly coming up for you in the next 12 hours or so. What are you expecting from it?
You know, I think that's a great question to start us right out of the gate. Fundamentally, you know, I think what I'm expecting from it is the beginning of some unveiling of some serious corruption. We have Elon Musk coming out and saying that he's predicting a significant arrest regarding some of the stuff going on with Tesla. We know that, you know, Trump and Musk and a number of others have essentially been terming these acts, you know, with Tesla going on in the United States as acts of terrorism that places them under a completely different jurisdiction. It allows for expanded military surveillance capabilities under Executive Order 13224, which has been active here in the United States for coming up on 24 years. It'll be 24 years this coming September. And that national emergency, that's one of those things that a lot of people, you know, put to the wayside. And I've been talking about this relentlessly over the last 12 months because it is just so important that all of the national emergencies, all of the executive order conditions that are created inside the U.S. government and inside the domestic U.S. landscape are closed off, in a proper way, in an adjudicated way, in a way that's by the book and by the law. And the president, by law, under certain wartime conditions, in many cases, is the only one who can decide that those national emergencies have now concluded. Congress can, but not if Congress is sort of impacted and hobbled, made incapacitated, for lack of a better term, by some of the activities behind those national emergencies. So that's sort of a long tangent to come back to the Tesla situation, but with the acts of terrorism component that comes into this, you have the ability to track and trace, you have the ability to engage different levels of law enforcement, you unlock certain emergent resources that can be put on the case with things like this. It's always about, what's going on in the shadows, right? One of the things that the entity online called Q told us a number of times is distractions are necessary. You don't waste ammunition on the battlefield. There are certain things that pose a threat. There are certain things that don't pose a threat. And so looking at this landscape developing out right now, it very much appears, between these issues and others, by the way, the financial, the geopolitical, even some of the moves made by the Trump government with respect to foreign policy. A lot of this, in my opinion, is in service to shadow movement structures that are driving the ball further up the field for we the people. And I know we're all chomping to get to that end zone, right? We're sort of jonesing at the bit to really get there, but we started on the 1 yard line on the other side of the field. So we've made some really good progress up until this point, and there's still progress yet to be made.
Just on the international and geopolitical thing, I've been watching a lot of reports coming out of Africa at the moment. There are so many countries really stepping up and taking back their sovereignty and their lands and their I think it's Ibrahim Traore in one of the countries, Bianco Faso, that's doing an amazing job over there. Now, I know there's a lot of misinformation in a lot of the TikTok stuff that we do see, but there seems to be a lot of countries in Africa now stepping up. But I've also seen a bit of pushback from Trump and Musk, because these countries are kicking out the French, their military, their companies, their corporations, and taking back their mines and starting to create their own foods and things. But there seems to, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but do you know anything around what's going on in Africa and why there'd be pushback? Because I think they're talking about getting rid of American military bases out of Africa also. Do you know much about that?
Africa is an interesting area. I focused, a little bit on Africa over the last 3 to 5 months or so. It's sort of become more important when Africa Command came across my radar in a much more involved fashion starting springtime of last year. But fundamentally, I think what you're seeing, again, I hate to wax repetitive, but we're coming back to the irregular warfare component. If the idea is to detach the African nations as a whole, the continent itself, from the dependency on Western world and neo-post-colonial world powers, and simultaneously rid them of an infestation that really we all sort of collectively brought to the table down there between the activities of the West, the activities of the East, in many ways even the activities of old kingdoms of the African continent. And you can go back and look at a number of examples of that, especially in Somalia. I think we have to look at how do we best accomplish that operating within the mind control parameters that have been put out there in the world, right? Every section of the world has a segmented and subcompartmentalized version of the media that they receive that in many cases is completely polar opposite to the media that's being received in other areas around the world on the same topic. And so it creates this constancy of misunderstanding and this constancy of division. We have a subcontinent in Africa with the western portion of Africa and beneath the Sahara, where they've essentially been entirely dependent on the Western world for information exchange, for financial solvency, in many cases for just the meeting of their basic resources, because various post-colonial powers and even in some cases, intra-colonial powers inside their own continent have been sort of fleecing one another dry. And so one of the things I think you're seeing with the pushback now from Trump, from Musk, and from others is encouraging those nations that are well underway in detachment, right? This is not something where they're sort of giving pushback on the issue of them detaching from DC. The detachment has already occurred. Now they're becoming more solvent. They're becoming more self-sufficient, self-securing, for lack of a better term. And we're seeing them now pushed out of the nest by Trump, by Musk, by others, being encouraged to bring their own information infrastructure online, for example, to seek new alliances with both continental partners and worldwide partners, to include Moscow. And Moscow has a heavy involvement there in Africa. And I'm certain some of this is being influenced in the background by conversations that are happening between Putin, between Trump, and their various respective staff members that remain in contact, I would say, weekly, even though we don't hear about that in much of the media or much of the podcast space. This is a really incredible, but also, confusing in some cases, time to be alive, because we're now entering this next Trump presidency, right? We had the silent Trump presidency that we just came through, where the military really did a good job, in my opinion, of augmenting the entirety of how the world conducts itself. And now we're in this new period, this second publicly visible Trump presidency, where a great deal of this change is going to have to be codified for legacy while the battle is still ongoing. There are still pockets of resistance. There are still areas that can throw this off trail. Trump told us this at the end of January, where he said that this is still a chess game with moves being made at the highest levels. We're still seeing a call and response format. So when we look at the nature of what's happening in Africa or in the Middle East, or even in the Western Hemisphere with South America, certain renaming of land masses and land bodies, this talk of acquiring various territories, all of it is in service to irregular warfare responding to a deep state playbook that is certainly well underway and has not really stopped, even though we decapitated their planners many, many years ago.
Yeah, I see, and I try and explain it to people that what you see is not what's actually happening, because the way I see it, and this is what we're trying to do, I guess, on an individual and a community level, is to push people to get to the point where they're so pissed off they stand up for their own rights, and why interrupt the government or the enemy while they're destroying themselves. So I welcome all the draconian measures that the government call on, and I see Trump doing that on a global level, where he's talking about taking over countries and pushing them to actually get some pride back in their country. Say, no, how about you go and get out of here. This is our country, and we're going to control how this country's run. So I think he's forcing patriotism and country to step up to the plate and realise that they've got to, they've got to look after their own affairs. And to me, that's what's playing out that maybe a lot of people don't kind of comprehend.
You're on mute, SG.
I've got a question, SG, about Doge and Elon Musk. They seem to be making great inroads at the moment to the American people, almost, I think, on a daily basis. They're explaining the wastage and the fraud and the corruption that they are finding. This must be opening up those that are less awake than others in America. And obviously, there are calls loudly here in Australia, and I suspect in probably most other countries around the world, for a similar kind of Doge operation into every government. Are you seeing that the Elon Musk Doge operation is a pathway to those people that haven't woken up in America yet?
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up. We sort of talked a little bit about that prior to jumping on today, and I think that's exactly what you're seeing. If the goal is to bring the entirety of the mass population around to the hardest of the truths, right? And there are difficult truths, and Q tells us that the choice to know will be yours, but they will be presented. There will be an option to know. In other words, it's going to be a publicly acknowledged reality, even if it's sort of acknowledged privately in the drive-through line. And so if the goal is to get to that particular point throughout a consciousness that is only now beginning to come around to election fraud, to the COVID crime, for example, the deception inside of pharmacopoeia, the deception inside, all of the different judiciary applications. We talked a little bit about that as well. The deception inside all of these arenas, they're only now beginning to grapple with what I would characterize as surface level awakening topics. And we have to get them pretty far up the mountain here. One of the best ways to ski lift them, for lack of a better term, up a great deal of that mountain is to do so in the least emotional pathway. And the pathway that I would select, if it were me, would be money. It would be the business arena itself, the commercialization, the extension of our transactive activities in the world, right? Because the phrase, it's nothing personal, it's just business, really does ring true with some deep resonant truth, I think, for a lot of people. People understand intuitively, regardless of their political lens or their ideological lens, that the work of their hands and the trade-off of their life force energy for a remuneration of some kind has to be a value exchange that they are content and satisfied with, and it has to benefit them in some form or fashion, even if that benefit is just as basic as keeping a shelter over their head. And that's the situation that many thousands and millions of us out there have been grappling with for a very long time. But if you want to now bring that population into a much more catalyzing, much more polarizing set of awarenesses, you have a lot of different variables to work with. And one of those variables is their responsiveness to it. You don't want them to immediately reject it right out of hand. And because so much emotional mind control has existed in the world over the last, really, I would say 300 to 500 years, but certainly in the last 80 years in its current form, that's a really, really difficult hill to sort of top over. And we have to get the vast majority of people to the other side of that, or we will never be able to build the promised land. We do need all of us. It is truly a grander chorus operation, even though some of us are, pretty worn out with how long it takes our fellow men and women to come around to that table. And I'm not, completely insensitive to that reality, but I will say it's got to be organic. It has to have meaning. Someone convinced against their will just to get along is of the same opinion still at the end of the day, and that doesn't get us anywhere. So I think what we're seeing with Doge, and I think what we're going to be prepared for through the monetary vector, is the introduction of much more dark levels of criminality. When we talk about, money, we can trace money all of the way back to waste and fraud and corruption. We can also trace money to child trafficking and human solicitation and prostitution and smuggling and things of this nature. And I think that's one of the things that I think those are some of the directions, is a better way to say it, that we'll end up going here with these Doge discoveries and these Doge discussions over this year, and into next year here in the United States.
Q said we would be very surprised with the first major arrest. I'm just looking through the media in Australia today. P. Diddy seems to be a great tool to wake up particularly the younger generations, if they choose to use the intelligence they seem to have gleaned from him and during his jail term. Do you think that exposure will come through the operations that Diddy was running?
You know, I think Diddy will be a piece of a broader puzzle. I think one of the things that you're going to see is organized solicitation of human beings and smuggling of human beings between political and celebrity pulpits that ties back to foreign powers. And I think one of those powers is going to be the Kiev government in Ukraine. I think you're also going to see the French and Spanish governments involved in that. And I think you're also going to see some of the governments in the Middle East involved in that. And it won't just be the government in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. There are others involved as well. It's worth remembering that, you know, throughout this process, you have capture components in essentially every major nation, you know, nation state player around the planet. And that capture component ties back to this same central core motive. You know, that sort of hints on those dark truths that we were just talking about a moment ago. Who did fund the $60,000 for the Barack Obama, you know, hot dog party in 2000? I think it was 2010 or 11. If I'm not mistaken, you'll have to forgive me on my date there. You know, how did that actually happen? Who transacted those monies? Who ensured that the capital, and we all know what the capital was, who ensured that it arrived, and who ensured that it was, you know, removed from the on-site area? Do we have capture and control in Secret Service, for example? You know, these are reasonable questions that are going to have to be answered, and the best way, in my opinion, to start answering them for the mass public is to trace the monetary origins.
SG, sorry, Carl. SG, earlier this year, I watched an interview with a woman who was a lieutenant colonel, retired, I think, from the Navy, and she was explaining about how the Restored Republic had been built in the background, and how you got control of your counties and that kind of thing. Now, she was, from what I could gather from that interview, she was alluding to the possibility of having fresh elections for the Republic of America and not the Corporation of America. Are you aware of anything along those lines? Is that something that may be happening on July 4 or sometime in the not too distant future?
You know, it's very interesting, that particular discussion on that. So, you know, there is a movement to restore the Republic. Actually, there are many movements in the United States right now to restore the Republic. One of them has gleaned my attention in a pretty significant way. It's called the Re-Inhabited Republic. And for the audience out there, I'm just going to refer you to my most recent statement video that I put out on the 10th of March of this year. So just this last month, regarding that particular entity. You know, there's a lot to unpack there, and it would be too much to unpack here. But fundamentally, the essence of the interview you're talking about is that when we arrive at a point where a governmental shift is needed or is being facilitated by the current geopolitical landscape, then we need a short turnaround period for a lawful election to establish, you know, fraud-free representatives, essentially is the goal there. And I think that fundamentally at the end of the day, the essence of that, if not the literal interpretation of that, is probably true. Now, the timeline, which you sort of hinted at with this July 4th comment, I don't know about that particular timeline. It would surprise me if we got there July 4th of 25. President Trump has told us that there's a massive party that they're planning, a great American fair that they're planning from May of this year up to July, up through the end of July next year, July 4th of next year, which would be the 250th anniversary for the 1776 Declaration. And so looking at that period of time, that tells me that a great deal of very important and transformative things are going to occur, because a great American fair, or any great fair in any country anywhere, is to showcase the modern developments and the coming of the new age, right? That's always the historic implication of that. So I think there's a major symbolism to be drawn from that. But with respect to the timing on new elections, I'm cautiously optimistic that the new elections component, whether this Trump presidency, you know, during this first few years, whether it's the next Trump presidency, whenever it happens, the goal is to have these new elections when a period exists in the you know, country, in the appetite of the public, for lack of a better term, to have completely transparent and completely open processes when it comes to, you know, selecting their representatives, because that's the only way that you can prevent a fraudulent capture and essentially a silent insurrection from immersing itself into the system again. And that's going to have to be done, in my opinion, with incorruptible means. Paper ballot seems the most sensible option based on what we have, you know, right now in the present day and present time. And maybe we move to quantum at some point down the road, but getting a handle on the wheel of the train is the essence of what you're talking about. And I think that's coming probably during this Trump presidency, if I was to speculate, but if not during, immediately after.
That's interesting, because we've got an election coming up And Carl and Darren did do a great interview last week regarding if we should vote or not vote. Darren, do you want to do a little quick intro into that?
Oh, it's funny because I was on Bass Coast Radio last night with Johnny Cantoni, and we spoke about this exact thing. And look, my opinion is that we shouldn't be voting. And anyone that thinks that they can vote and put someone in there or beg or petition to get their freedom or have someone reinstall their freedom, in my point, is actually defeating the purpose of you don't know who you are and you don't know that you already have your freedom. We just need to take it and educate the masses. And to me, it's not the polling booth or Canberra, which is our Washington, if you like, that's going to reinstall. It's the the court of public opinion that I believe that we need to win, and that's where I'm at. So I'm a big proponent of we should not be taking part in a fraudulent election, which we know it is, and supporting the fraud on many reasons. It's a spiritual war, and as far as I'm concerned, the system is the devil or Satan, and we're on God's side, and you can't mix and match. As far as I'm concerned, now that I have a very defined, it's my logic and it's my opinion, and plenty of people are going to disagree, but in my mind, that we shouldn't be taking part in that. We've got to rebuild the new outside of their system and create somewhere for people to come to that's going to be better than what they're stuck in this slave system at the moment.
And then we had Vince's for voting. And do you want to explain that one, Carl? What Vince's side was?
His side was pretty much making sure that people did something. We have to be seen to do something, and if we can gain enough support to put maybe 1, 2, hopefully 6 senators in, that will be enough of a voting bloc so that we call our major parties here the uni party, because they're two cheeks of the same asshole, as we put them. There's no difference, and we need to be able to put a breaker in between our lower house and our upper house, or into the upper house, so that these bastards can't ramrod legislation through that damages the people and just enriches themselves more. I'm not sure, though, that we are. I mean, I'm with Darren. I've given up on the court system. I've given up on the police and the judiciary completely. We have no control. We can go into courts here. We can prove and basically give unrebuttable proof of the fraud that is happening. But until we actually have someone in those courtrooms that works for the people, not for the corporation, we are hamstrung at every step. Now, your legal system works a little bit differently, and for a long time I've believed that your Supreme Court system has been captured. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Our system is slightly different to yours, and capturing it isn't as easy. There seems to be a lot more moving parts in our system for whatever reason. Can you enlighten us as to a path we might be able to get justice from in the near future? And Australians have been pinning their hope on Donald Trump to give us justice, which I think is, pie in the sky sort of stuff, unless we do become the 52nd or 3rd state of the US, in which case, as Darren was saying before, that's more going to engender a patriotic response from Australians, and it won't be a positive one, to go and join America in most cases, I don't believe. So how do we keep the focus on the people? How do we keep empowering those that follow us to keep pushing that system, even though we know, and Darren can tell you, he can get right into it, but we'll get no justice from it. They will just ex parte the hearing and administer you.
Well, it's very interesting. You should phrase it that way, administer you, because that's exactly what's happening at the bureaucratic and corporatized level here in the United States of America. And you're right, the system itself is sort of predisposed to the type of corporocratic corruption that we're all seeing in full display and all around the planet. The question, how do we get justice? That's a massive, massive question. I think in the broader sense, we can't have, we can't walk in faith without action, right? That's something that the good book talks about. actions are necessary, and we have to go through those actions. Even Jesus the Christ told us to give Caesar what was Caesar's. In other words, don't waste too much energy attempting to flog against the system, but also don't be in the world, or excuse me, don't be of the world, even though you are in the world. Is what I'm trying to say there. So, with respect to moving along in the capacity that we're at, and maintaining morale and momentum, I think this is sort of the flavor of the upcoming audio file 90 that I'm preparing to publish right now. And the entirety behind that is acknowledging that the world has changed so dramatically in such a small period of time that there is now a sliver of hope that the types of things we have talked about are actually able to come to pass. One of those things being in the United States, the elimination of the Internal Revenue Service. 6 to 8 years ago, something like that would have been completely pie in the sky unbelievable for even some hardcore awakened patriots, right? And now we're seeing the actual implementation of that type of ideology and that type of attitude. And I don't foresee it being very long before we see some movement in the judicial area and then in the judicial arena, sort of along the same lines. In the U.S. system, for example, the Congress has sole power over the federal judiciary and can dissolve entire component parts of the federal judiciary by a 2/3 vote in both houses. So in other words, you can actually leverage the people's house under the American system and bring the courts to heel if that congressional system is willing to act on behalf of the people. And I think that's the choice that God has been giving them over this last 6 to 8 years. And I say God because I can't think of a single human being patient enough to allow what has occurred, right? So, but we have seen many that have come around. We have seen many that have managed to sort of understand that they're going to be on the wrong side of history. And I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic, that we'll continue to see that. With respect to the no relief being available inside those judicial systems and inside those court systems, the same is true, unfortunately, in a great deal of the American system. And I don't believe the Supreme Court of the United States, even now, despite its clear trend on behalf of we the people over the last 10 years, I don't believe that it's completely out of the woods with that. And so I think the public pressure simply has to increase. It has to continue to come. There has to be a presence made known from the public to the court systems and all of those that work within the court systems that they are agents of the government, that they are public servants, that they do have a job to respect the constitutionality of their office and their position. And if they are not willing to do that, then they will simply be exposed for the world to see. And sometimes shame is a more effective methodology of punishment than anything else.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we've got Dale. We've just got Dale that wants to jump in, and then you can close, Daz.
Sweet.
I just want to interject on this whole voting thing, definitely here in Australia. Now, vote or no vote, it's up to the individual. But the thing is that we're playing on their game board. So if you don't want to vote, the best thing you can do is still rock up. Mm-hmm. Put a line through every single name and write on the bottom, no suitable candidate to follow my will. So that needs to be recognized within their game board system. Now, you can vote for these so-called freedom fighting senates and candidates. But in the end, if you don't want to vote for anyone, still go down there, cross your line through every single candidate and write, not suitable candidate to follow my will. That will give more attention to the game board and the system. And if a lot of people do that, they're going to call another re-election. So, you've got to remember the power.
I don't think
the power is within the people.
I think the vote actually ends up going to somebody else.
No, it's a donkey. It would be classed as a donkey vote.
But you're giving them consent that they have an authority. So the minute you cross your name off, you're contracting to the corporation and the corporate government. So in the referendum last year, we had a 28 to 30% non-voter turnout and a big win for the no vote, which we had almost an 78%, I think it was, vote of no confidence in the government. What I would love to see this election, and it doesn't mean not doing anything. We can turn up on the polling booths and we can be handing out information like the union do, and informing and educating the public and the candidates and anyone and everyone that walks past. But if we could get a no voter turnout of not getting your name crossed off, so you don't give them the opportunity of using that number to fudge a result, of over 30% and get the primary vote for both Liberal and Labor uni parties under 30%, to me that would be a massive step forward and send a way bigger message, in my opinion. And that's what I'll be proponent of, and we're developing flyers for exactly that reason for the last 2 weeks on the pre-polling and on election day, to actually hand out information and, like I said, win the court of public opinion, educate the masses, because that's where we need to get the numbers. Let them get in whoever they want to get in, because it doesn't matter if Albanese gets in or who gets in. If we get 2 more independents in, they'll just have an extra 2 Liberal people across the floor if they need to get something through that the United Nations are telling them to get through, which is our bankruptcy trustee for all territories since the Yalta Agreement and the United Nations were formed in 45. So to me, the system is evil, and we want to expose it and not take part in it. So I'll leave and I'll finish on that. And I'd just like to say, so I can say it, SG Anon, mate, I really love your work and appreciate everything that you do and your knowledge, and thanks for your time today. And thank
Honored.
you, Beck.
Thank you.
Yeah, same for me. It's the 3rd or 4th go I've tried to get up and catch up with you, so I'm really pleased that we finally managed to do it. So look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Likewise, and thank you very much for having me. I always appreciate the intimate conversation component, because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll close with this. We are moving into a period of time now where we're starting to see, and I don't know about you all, but I 100% am starting to see individuals in my orbit and in my circle finally looking up, finally deciding that something is wrong with the media, that something is wrong with the feedback on the financial component, that something is wrong with the understanding of geopolitics that they're being presented. And they're seeing it more and more in their own communities. And that's really what has to happen, right? The imminence of the national government and the control of nation states from a single capital and a single pulpit is made possible by the decentralized emanation from all of the different communities across that culture, right? And that's one of the main things I think we need to amplify throughout this process, is we are all, you know, fundamentally we the people, we are all humanity, but we also have our distinct cultures that we're proud of and communities that we've built, in many cases spending hundreds of years to build. And there's something worthwhile with that, and there's something proud to have. You know, there's a level of pride within that that's really hard to describe. And in my opinion, based on the historic record, it looks very much impossible to replicate. It's sort of part of the human experience. And we're moving into a period now, finally, where a great deal of our brothers and sisters are finally paying attention to that and acknowledging that that might be a better way to go than this other direction that, you know, mankind has sort of been archetyped into for a very long time.
Yeah, I think so. And Dale, did you just want to say one quick question before we close? Because I know you came in a little late.
Yeah,
And then
sorry
we'll finish
about
up.
being a bit late, you know, life and all. But we might touch this on the next show, you know, next interview we do with the SG. And I just wanted to talk about the whole trade wars, which I do believe, you know, the announcement tomorrow, what Trump's going to come out, it's all got to do about the trade wars globally. I do believe there's got to be a lot more countries involved on the spectrum now. Australia's got to be one of them. Hence, due to the influence on China's what's had in their military stance here in Australia in the last couple of weeks to months, and what they're doing currently to Taiwan. Have you been looking into that on their movements at the moment? Because, you know, they're sort of floating under the radar, I've noticed, compared to the political, you know, voicing definitely what's coming out of the America.
Well, it's really interesting you should bring that up, and it's probably a phenomenal area to close with. You know, your all's audience will probably recall a period in time, or a speech rather, that was made by President Xi. I think it was in 2022, it may have been in early 2023, where President Xi stated that the future and destiny of all mankind would depend on whether or not the people of the United States and the people of China could learn to live together with one another. And so that statement was enormously gravitational coming from an Asian head of state. This is typically, you know, reflective of a culture, and the entirety of the Asiatic cultures are sort of reflective of this very, you know, almost diminished, not diminished, that's the wrong word for it, but just very calm, very reserved, very stoic, and pulled back from the table. They have excellent poker faces, I guess, is a good comparison for it. And that's a cultural extension of who they are and how they live their lives, and in many cases, their spiritual belief systems as well. So for that type of a statement to come from the office of the presidency for the People's Republic of China is a massive, massive thing that I don't think received a whole lot of attention. I brought some attention to it myself, but I really didn't talk about it too much longer after that because things were moving and have been moving at such a continually accelerating pace. Now we have this period of time where President Trump has come into office publicly again here in the United States. Obviously, this trading back and forth with China is going to be a major issue on the table. We've seen some attention drawn to that a little bit. We've certainly seen some attention drawn to the Chinese component with respect to threat analysis here in the United States of America. And it is worth remembering that, again, in every nation state, you have a capture and control component and a patriotic component. China is no different from that. And so there is a threat analysis component that's being worked, and this is sort of a multi-angular board that's being played. But we have serious silence from the major areas of Chinese military and political power with respect to how they're going to interact with most of the West, but more activity happening on the ground. What happened with Taiwan just in recent weeks, for example, the Philippine Coast Guard ship that was, I think, just a couple of weeks ago at this point, China moved one of their bombers into the South China Sea very recently. So I think what's happening is more indicative that we have a situation occurring at the international level that's going to result in massive changes coming to both sides of the aisle. And you have one side sort of preparing for that. I would submit, based on, and this is speculation, but it's based on some pretty good research, that one of those areas is going to be in the world of finance. We know that Asia has been essentially saving a tremendous amount of wealth, sort of skimming it off and hiding it very, very well away from this Kabbalistic structure over the last 2,500 years or so, because those groups out of Central, South, and Eastern Asia have understood that there would come a point in time where that wealth could be repurposed again and used to heal the world rather than what it was being used for and what it has been used for over that same period. And so we're seeing that the preparation for that's been going on for a number of years now. And I think that's a good possibility that we see some of that injected back into the system, probably in response to significantly unstable events, right? And we just saw yesterday here in the United States a loss of approximately, I think it was $900 billion. It was almost $1 trillion worth of market wealth off of the Dow, the S&P 500, the overall market space itself, which is a massive, massive one-day loss that nobody's talking about. No particular area turned down more than 5 to 6% on its own, but collectively you saw a massive sag in the system that occurred yesterday, and we don't really know what's going to happen as a result of that because we're only about 24 hours on at this point from that particular event. So what's happening with China, what's happening with President Trump, certainly the entirety of the Indo-Pacific region, Japan heavily involved in this, the activities coming out of South Korea recently, especially with respect to ongoing criminal investigations into Samsung for foreign data, for foreign users, data privacy breaches and things like that. I think that we're seeing the augmentation of our dynamics with one another in real time. And I think China is preparing to go much more public with some of those overt changes than has been over the last couple of years.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Right. That was how it ended. Thank you so much. I hit the off button a little bit quick at the end of that recording. So we did record that earlier today, and I've seen and noted a number of questions that you've asked of SG in the chat. Pardon me. I'll try and go through some of the things that I've starred here just to go back for. Misha asks about Guru. I was speaking to Guru the other day. I've actually sent him some X39 patches. And hopefully they will give him some benefit for what he's going through at the moment. Guru's pretty stoic, and yes, what he's going through at the moment is probably painful, and certainly is a little concerning. But he and Mel both are working positively towards a great result, and we're all praying for him and doing what we can to help. It is a form of skin cancer that he's got on his lip, I believe. So. We're working to find a solution that helps him. And I believe there are a lot of us trying to help him. God love him. So all power to him, and we'll help any way we can. Mary wanted to know about SG, knowing what's going to happen in Australia. We did talk to him off air outside of the recording about a few different things. We didn't specifically refer to what's going or what could happen here in Australia because at the moment that's not really his area of regard when it comes to his research. So his insight into what could happen here in Australia would be a very broad one, and we hopefully we'll get a more in-depth chat in that when we get back together next time. Craig tells us about some god-awful bloody laws that have been passed in Victoria this morning, making it illegal for any person to have an opinion about any other person, particularly if that person happens to be offended. In Victoria? Are you in Victoria? Why? When are you leaving? Victoriastan is just getting worse. Just getting worse. And I bet you all thought getting rid of Dan Andrews was going to help. Well, that stupid bitch that they put in isn't doing a great job for you, really, is she? But they're making sure that you're well bent. I think I kicked this bloke who, or Anita. Oh, yeah, Anita. You might have seen this pop up in the chat. Joey Kalaka for Aussie Doge. Get it trending. Get the memes on there. You know what Joey Kalaka is? Kangaroo dick. So Anita got banned. Thank you to whoever the mod was that banned him. I kicked him out for 5 minutes, but somebody kicked him out forever. So very cool. Do we think Trump will come to Australia? Now, not while Albanese's in power, certainly. There might, and I call it a might, be an avenue for him to come to Australia should there be a change of government and a complete change of attitude towards China from the Australian government. Yes, I think there would be a change of attitude if, I don't even want to speak it, Dutton gets elected. But it'll be one or the other, sadly, because there's not enough of you standing up to get into the lower house. Sorry. We've got to kill these parties, people. We've got to stop this party process because the party process is killing us, every bit of us. Does SG know about the Navy ships travelling around Australia? Could they be a threat to our cabal government, or are they CCP Chinese? At the moment, I would say they are CCP Chinese, but who knows? Xi and President Xi, that is, from China, and Trump have been friends for a fairly long time. They respect each other. When I say a fairly long time, at least 8 years, and probably closer to 12 or 16. Now, Xi, for those of you who followed the show, and you'd probably be following it for a few years, we haven't spoken about this relationship in a long time. And I nearly brought it up while we were talking with SG this morning, but time didn't really allow. Xi, you might recall, was appointed Supreme Chairman for life, President for life in China, a little bit like Mao Zedong. However, Xi got to that position because he was being backed by some very powerful expatriate Chinese families. These are essentially Chinese royalty that can trace their lineage back to the dynasty days, and you will be forgiven for believing, or maybe not believing, that these families have lived in isolation. Not so much isolation, but they have not been allowed to return to China. They've not been allowed to play any role in politics in China. And they've essentially been exiled to Malaysia, Singapore in particular, and Thailand and other areas. These families are colloquially known as the dragon families, and they are extremely wealthy and they are extremely dedicated to getting a good life back for the Chinese people, a life that has been taken from them through the CCP. Now, Xi was appointed, anointed, and backed by the dragon families to become president of China and further to become the exalted leader until he dies. Does this mean anything in the big scheme of things? Only time will tell. Could it be that we do have some Chinese ships floating around our coastline as a bit of a reminder to the government, to the military, to say, hey, listen, there's a bit going on in the world and you blokes might want to, start looking at it, start pulling your weight. Or it could simply be an irritant, which is essentially what Australia is to China in the South China Sea. We are overflying their created islands. We are sending ships through the international shipping lanes that China claim are theirs. Recently, we've had aerial instances of dynamic flying, let's call it, where Chinese jets have intercepted Australian aircraft very closely indeed. So close, in fact, that a great many warnings and things have been issued about and expressed to the Chinese government about their pilots and how close they are flying to other aircraft. They are dropping all sorts of interesting little bits and pieces out of their aircraft in front of the Australian aircraft and American aircraft for that too. They are overflying our ships as they go through the South China Sea. And we also have at least one frigate, I think it is, around Taiwan, just sitting off and around up there somewhere. So, look, we are prodding the Chinese. Who cares if they circumnavigate Australia? What are they going to do? You'll find that most of them are hanging around now off Western Australia. Why is that? Well, because the Chinese are back searching for all that missing gold that was on MH370. You might know that there is a Malaysian Airlines, well, not really funded. It's we'll look, and if we find anything, you pay. If we don't find anything, you don't pay kind of deal. Well, the Chinese spent 4 years and a great deal of money. Well, actually, Australia spent the vast amount of money on the Chinese for 4 years while they were based out of Fremantle and off pinging the Indian Ocean, trying to find what was left of MH370. Now, if you believe for 1 second, I think there were 238 people, it might have been 278 people on that MH370 jet. If you think for one moment the Chinese government gives a flying fart about dead Chinese people in the middle of the Indian Ocean, you are wrong. There is 1.4 billion Chinese people, although that number seems to be diminishing for some reason very rapidly. There are hundreds of thousands of Chinese people going missing at the moment. That's something else we'll talk about in later shows. But this is a major concern. So watch this space would be what I'd say. There's something else I was going to say, but I don't think I can. Not just yet. I might be speaking out of turn. So I'll hang on to what I was going to say there. But I don't think I'll have to hang on to it long. Are the Chinese going to invade Australia, fire on us, do anything stupid with 1 or 2 ships floating around the country? No. Australia will have, if we're lucky to get the gerbil up and peddling it, a Collins-class submarine somewhere out there trying to shadow them. It'll also be trying to shadow the Chinese submarine that will be following that ship or leading it, one of the two. So it's a great exercise for our naval forces, a great exercise for our air forces to find, locate, track, and monitor these Chinese vessels. But do they pose any great threat to the country? I don't think so. And SG would have very limited knowledge of that particular situation here in Australia. So that's why we didn't canvass it then. I hope that answers a few questions. You thought that plane went down north of Singapore in the mountains. Fern, are you talking about MH370? No. It went down with all wheels landing at Diego Garcia, where it was unloaded of all the dead bodies and the many tons of gold that America was shipping to China to buy back some, if not all, of its GFC, 2008 GFC debt. China swept in after the 2008 GFC and bought all of America's debt. Why would they do that? Well, because you have America in your debt. That's why. And the Chinese did it very, 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 very well. Of course, Obama freaked out once he found out that what they were doing. was going to essentially be able to hold America over a flame. And the Chinese were very prepared to do that. So they had to buy that debt back. But what happens when you go to Fort Knox and you don't have enough gold in there to buy it all back? Because that's how it has to be bought back, in gold. Well, luckily, places like Fort Knox aren't just a depository for American gold. They're a depository for French, German, many other countries' gold. But certainly French and German, British and Australian gold was used to pay this debt back to China. So the Americans went into those vaults. They took our gold bars, Germany's bars, France's bars, Britain's bars, and a few other countries. And they made a great big pile of gold, shipped it on a plane. That flight, that same aircraft, originated out of America and went to Bangkok before its next leg on to Beijing, where the gold was meant to be delivered. Yes, there are stories of scientists with super chips and super chip technology that they had created in America going back to China and maybe going to give all that superconductor quantum computing hardware and software knowledge to the Chinese, and the Americans weren't going to allow that. Not the case. Well, that might have been, they may have been on there, but I've never been able to confirm that in any way, shape, or form. What I can confirm is that there was a shitload of gold on that flight, and it was due to go back to China to pay back the debt. Now, that creates a massive problem for the Americans, because what happens when Australia, French, German bombs go in and try and get some of their gold back and they discover it's not there? Well, it'd be a very bad look for the US government to be caught stealing other countries' gold and paying off their debt with it. So they needed to get that gold back and put back into their vaults. Now, of course, the handover happened in America. You know, somebody from the US State Department said, righto, here's your 28 tons of gold. And somebody from China said, gee, thanks very much. And they hopped on the plane, saw it get loaded on the plane. And from that moment on, that gold was in China's hands. America was no longer responsible for it. So if the plane went down, oh, that's just bad luck. Very sad, very sorry. But what do you want us to do about it? I mean, we'd already given you the money. We'd already given you the gold. We've already got our debt bought back. And if you don't give it back, then we'll take you to court and international courts and do whatever. China had nowhere to go other than to try and find MH370 and that gold, because they certainly weren't looking for 238 or 278 dead people, some of whom were Chinese. They spent 4 years with their 4 largest deep sea recovery vessels pinging the Indian Ocean floor looking for any signs of that jet between Fremantle and the east coast of Africa. And they found nothing. Interestingly, the only things that were ever found from MH370 washed up in rather strange places and didn't seem to have the amount of barnacles on them that they would have had they been in the water that long. There were a lot of very weird bits that washed up in various different places. Very easy to be taken out on a US ship, particularly from Diego Garcia, dumped into the right part of the ocean so that and if you think the Navy don't understand the way the ocean works and they can't drop a piece of debris here and have it wash up on an island 1,000 kilometers away, you're wrong. They can do that very easily. So that's exactly what they did. They've been dumping bits of that aircraft, which has been buried under Diego Garcia in the underground hangars that they house things there. And it's been slowly but surely pulled apart as required, with little bits of it taken out and dumped into the ocean to be found. That keeps the Chinese, looking, oh, well, maybe there is a plane down there somewhere. The fact of the matter is, America got away, Obama got away with one of the greatest thefts in history. And he took it all from the Chinese government. So, gonna be interesting times when all of that comes out. How do they not know when all flights are GPS tracked? Ads. GPS that day wasn't working. I remember this day exceptionally clearly. I was driving limousines at the time, and for a variety of different reasons, I ran 3 different GPS units in that car. None of them worked that day, which is really, really a pain in the ass when you're a limo driver and you don't know where you've got to go and pick people up from. But in the morning that day, no GPS was working. None of us in the professional driving field had access to GPS that day. Rather interesting, don't you think, that it all happened to go down that day? Anyway, no GPS. The only way they were able to track, to a certain point anyway, MH370 was off the Ingasat satellite network, where the engines actually have a program that dials into the satellite, and every, I don't know, hour or so, they dial up and say, yes, I'm still working. They don't really give a position, but the satellite was able to be triangulated, so they got a vague idea of where this thing might have been. And funnily enough, those satellite transmissions fall into an overlap area that meant that that aircraft could have reached Diego Garcia quite easily. Why didn't the satellites keep reporting that it landed at Diego Garcia or that the engines had stopped? Well, we haven't ever been given that information, but I'm sure it'll come around one day. Maybe we'll live long enough to see it. All right, I've gone a bit long tonight. I hope I've answered the questions that you had out there. Get the Gregories. Thank you, Ian. Oh, God. The Gregories. Now, see, I had a Gregories and I had a Melways, or a Brisways, and I had a Sidways. I think I did actually get one of those Gregories at one stage. They were a hardcover from memory. Gee, that's a long time ago. Do you remember how we used to have maps in cars? And if you had a wife like mine, you'd never give her a map because you'd be driving backwards. That's the way she read them. She did a lot of things badly. I shouldn't have said that out loud. She didn't. She was a great woman for her second husband. That's all I'll say. All right, folks, love your work. Thank you, Aussie Sue. I hope you managed to get yourself packed up, and I have seen some pictures of the roads out west. For those of you that don't know, Aussie Sue lives north and west in far north Queensland, Mount Isa way, and the roads out in central western Queensland after the floods and the cyclone and the rain we've had for the last week are awful. In fact, roads are practically non-existent. I saw one today that looks like a jigsaw puzzle of bitumen and red dirt. If that's what you've got to go through to get down here to your new home in Russell Island, Aussie Sue, God love you. All power to you. And I sincerely hope that you get down here this week. Have yourself a good night, folks. Enjoy whatever it is you're going to be doing tomorrow, and we will see you again tomorrow night, provided the dickheads on the road don't do something stupid.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's roll!